Hello Freedom Youth, my name is Malachi Burton, for those of you who don't know me. And for today's message, I want to talk to you about identity, but through a different perspective, past versus the future. Your life is not defined by your past or mistakes, but defined by what God calls us to be. And I want you to all know that God's mercy and grace is bigger than any mistake you've made in the past. Matter of fact, myself, I'm actually 2.5 years sober, and I'm going through many seasons of alcoholism, suicidal phases, and depression. However, I chose to become victorious and not fall victim or prisoner of my past. There are two key scriptures that I said to myself countlessly, Romans 8:28 and Jeremiah 29:11. For I know that all things are working for my good. I know that God only has plans to give me a prosperous hope in the future. I want you all to know that your life was blessed with a finite number of pages, but an infinite number of chapters. For God wrote your life from finish to start so you can live your life from start to finish. And as a matter of fact, you have everything that you need to become the best author of your life. I want to remind you that you survived every single day of your life you called your worst. So you have the power to survive every single future day of your life that you call your worst. That 100% success rate is your superpower. For today's message, I want to talk about 4 key characters: Peter, Paul, Jacob, and the last character I'll get to in a second. First, I want to talk about Paul, whose original name was Saul. And matter of fact, he's actually led mass persecutions against the early Christians in the early church. And a result of his actions, Jesus actually blinded him. However, through grace, mercy, and transformation, Jesus renamed him from Saul to Paul. And long story short, Paul became not only one of the most influential key figures in the New Testament, but the Bible overall. The next character I want to talk to you about is Jacob. Jacob's name actually means trickster or deceiver, and he actually in the Bible is living out this name, this reputation to the fullest. It wasn't until one day he came across God and actually challenged him to a wrestling match, for he knew that God had the power to change his life and he was fed up with the life that he was living. Long story short, he actually wins the match and his name is later changed from Jacob to Israel, and he ended up being the father of the 12 tribes of Israel. The next person I want to talk to you about was Peter, and a lot of us can relate to Peter. Very strong, very determined, and very ambitious in the moment, but when trials and tribulations came, he kind of folded under pressure like many of us. However, Jesus had other plans. Peter, along the way to Jesus' crucifixion, denied him 3 times, and result of this, shame, guilt, and depression poured into his heart. Peter, as a matter of fact, reverted back to his old life before he became a disciple. However, Jesus had other plans. On his way to his crucifixion, Peter denied Christ 3 times, and this poured upon his heart depression, shame, and guilt, and led Peter to going back to his old life before he became a disciple. In the book of John, you see this picture painted very clearly. Peter is on a boat, and Jesus reappears to him after the resurrection just 100 yards away. During this encounter, Peter swims to a shore, and Jesus pours upon him love, transformation, forgiveness, and allows him to live his life to the fullest. I love how the Bible says that Jesus was 100 yards away. And in our own lives, we realize that it doesn't matter how many mistakes we've made or the past that we live, we're a lot closer to the blessings and the destiny that God has for us. You can't catch the blessings that the future has for you if your hands are closed, clenched, holding on to the past. The last character I want to talk to you about is Aang the Avatar, from a show I watched growing up, The Avatar: The Last Airbender. However, during the show, Aang had 2 choices to make, and he ends up making them both. During his early years, Aang was given a destiny, however he chose to fear everything and run instead of facing everything and rising. In a winter storm, Aang gets frozen in the water, and 100 years or so go by. After that, Aang. Okay, you said, what did you say? After that.
You can keep picking it up as you go. I mean, you don't have to go backwards.
Okay, what was the last thing you said?
After that.
After that.
Or Aang.
I'm gonna just start over from the top. Aang ran away, okay. The last character I want to talk to you about, I didn't smile. The last character I want to talk to you about is Aang the Avatar, from a show I watched growing up, The Avatar: The Last Airbender. Aang was given a destiny and chose to run away from it. And he ends up getting caught in a storm and gets frozen. Many years go by, he becomes unfrozen and he returns home thinking nothing has happened. However, war and destruction destroyed his home village. As a result of this, he becomes filled with shame and guilt because he knew he had the power to save all his loved ones. He chose to fear everything and run instead of facing everything and rising. However, he chose to switch this around and chose to face everything and rise through all the trials and tribulations and end up saving the world. I like to use fear in 2 acronyms: fear everything and run, or you can face everything and rise. I want to paint to you all a picture of a lotus flower. Lotus flowers are actually planted in mud that grow in the mud, rise through the water, and blossom on top of the water. In that same regard, our past mistakes can leave us feeling muddy. However, we have the power to grow through that, through the trials and tribulations of water, and blossom on top of the water, and live our destinies out to the fullness. The godly may fall 7 times, but they always stand up 8. And I will leave you off this quote from Dr. Seuss. You have brains in your head, you have feet in your shoes, you can steer your life in any direction that you choose. Just remember, it doesn't matter how dark your life may get, that above the clouds, the sun is always shining. Your life was blessed with a finite number of pages, but an infinite number of chapters. And just remember, freedom looks good in you. Until next time, Freedom Youth.